You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, we may see litigation between Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani over unpaid legal fees. First of all, I feel like this was a long time coming here. Can you speak on this new bankruptcy filing that Giuliani listed, where he actually invoked Donald Trump?
Yeah, Brian, within days of being ordered by the court to pay the $148 million judgment immediately, the defamation judgment that was won by Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman, the Georgia state election workers that Rudy Giuliani savaged, defamed, called drug dealers, falsely accused of stuffing ballot boxes for Joe Biden, whose lives he endangered in a very real sense. A DC jury ordered him to pay $148 million in damages. Rudy Giuliani apparently couldn't even file an appeal bond, which would have allowed him to appeal the finding in that lawsuit and hold off having to pay. Apparently, he couldn't even file an appeal bond. So the judge ordered him to pay out immediately. So what did he do days later? He declared bankruptcy. And, when you review some of what Rudy Giuliani put in his bankruptcy filing, it really is more befitting of The Onion, the satirical publication, or my generation's Mad Magazine. It's
Yeah.
just, some of it is just that ridiculous. So some of what Rudy Giuliani says is that, well, I've got some assets that should be coming my way because Donald Trump has failed to pay me an undetermined amount of legal fees. And when you kind of read through the reporting, again, it's almost comical, but it's actually very sad because Donald Trump is quoted as saying, this is in the New York Times, that he was telling people when Rudy was representing him in these election challenge cases, these bogus lawsuits that Giuliani and others were bringing on behalf of Donald Trump to try to overturn the election's results. Donald Trump is quoted by some associates as saying, Rudy doesn't get a dime if he doesn't win these cases. And of course, Rudy Giuliani didn't win a single case because he didn't have a case. So it really is bordering on absurd that Rudy is saying, well, I've got some assets coming my way because, of course, eventually Donald Trump will pay me the legal fees he owes me. You know what, Rudy? I wouldn't hold your breath.
Yeah. Uh, Glenn, in a case like this, on its face, I know you really can't speak on the specifics, but on its face, who is it clear who generally wins? Like, I would presume that it's the guy seeking unpaid legal fees, no? Between Giuliani and Trump.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is nobody wins because Rudy Giuliani owes a lot of people money, right? He owes $148 million courtesy of that defamation judgment to Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman. You'll recall, Brian, that some of Giuliani's own lawyers are suing him for something like $1 million in unpaid legal fees. Rudy, of course, stiffed his own lawyers, while Donald Trump seems to have stiffed Rudy. So the reality is everybody loses, certainly most directly the creditors, the people that Rudy owes money. Those are the ones who lose because there is money that Rudy rightly owes them, whether it's his own lawyers or Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman. And I'm hard pressed to see exactly where Rudy is going to get the money to satisfy those debts. So in bankruptcy, ordinarily what happens, I'm not a bankruptcy expert, but creditors, the people that Rudy owes money to, they end up getting like pennies on the dollar if they get anything at all. So the reality is the party who suffers the greatest loss is the party that Rudy owes money to.
Now, we've heard over the years about countless lawyers and vendors, contractors, employees of Donald Trump who didn't get paid by him. Why don't they just go after him? Like, is it because there is a financial hurdle in just starting litigation and Donald Trump knows that?
Well, if Donald Trump was ever a rich man, right, a billionaire like he claims to be, think about it. You are some contractor who provides some service to Donald Trump. Maybe you're a carpenter, or maybe you install carpets in some Trump property. And Trump is notorious for then stiffing those people. Basically, it's an implicit invitation. You want your money? You go ahead and sue me. So it's a great question. Why don't they sue him? Well, if Donald Trump, is as rich as he claims to be, he's going to have an unlimited amount of money to sink into that litigation if his contractors sue him to try to recover what he owes them. And, these kind of small contractors don't have an unlimited amount of money to meet the force of Donald Trump's scorched earth litigation. So I think that's why a lot of these contractors end up just licking their wounds, taking their losses. There's been a good bit of reporting that Trump would often pay perhaps 30%, 30 cents on the dollar that he owes these contractors. But it's interesting. I think whereas usually the contractors didn't want to get buried in litigation, now I think there may be a different calculation involved because Donald Trump owes so much money to so many people, and he's about to owe more. Think about the $5 million the first jury awarded to E. Jean Carroll in that defamation case. Most recently, the second E. Jean Carroll jury ordered Donald Trump to pay $83.3 million in damages. And we are on the verge, perhaps even on the eve, of seeing yet another damages award, this one in the civil fraud case that was tried before Judge Engoron in New York for Donald Trump's long-term systemic business fraud. And Attorney General Tish James is seeking $370 million. So now ask the question, why would people not want to sue Donald Trump to try to get some of the money, they allege he owes them?
Yeah.
Because Donald Trump, before too long, is going to become judgment proof. What does judgment proof means? It means you can't get blood from a stone. Donald Trump is going to be so deep in a financial hole that anybody who sues him with the expectation of actually recovering any money might be on a fool's errand.
Well, prior to this, prior to the point at which it becomes moot to sue him because he's going to be so indebted to everybody, he's not going to have any money anyway. Why didn't these attorneys or contractors, vendors, employees get together and sue someone like him in a class action lawsuit? Or does a class action have to be for the same exact violation on the same project?
Yeah, I'm going to throw out the caveat again that I am not a class action civil litigator. I do know a little bit about the topic, but think about this. Think about a drug manufacturer who produces one drug. That drug is taken by lots and lots and lots of people, and they suffer severe injuries as a result. That's the kind of thing that lends itself to a class action because all of the people suffered the same harm as a result of taking the same drug. So
Yeah.
their claims against the pharmaceutical company that manufactured that drug or distributed that drug, their claims are darn near identical, which is what gives rise to a class action lawsuit. However, when you have lots of different contractors providing lots of different services, potentially to lots of different Trump properties, it doesn't really give rise to the same similarity of claim that you see in the typical class action lawsuit.
Right. So he actually stands to benefit from finding like small companies, blue collar workers, because they're easier to exploit. And then the irony on top of that is that those are the same people he claims to be a champion of, all the while fucking them over every single chance he gets.
Yeah, Donald Trump doesn't seem to make the lives of his base, his supporters, appreciably better in any way. Arguably, he makes their lives appreciably worse. When he was in office, he was all too happy to try to help out the billionaires
Right.
with tax cuts. But what did he do for the average Joe who continues to send Donald Trump $5 here and $10 there, now perhaps to help Donald Trump pay out from under his many civil judgments? So it's tough to understand. It's inexplicable, but it seems like at this point, Donald Trump, he can fool the gullible or those people who are not interested or not capable of making kind of fact-based assessments of what he's really all about. But he's not fooling a lot of thinking men and women.
Yeah. Although, in fairness, I do have to say that he does have a big middle class tax cut coming out, and I think the time frame for that is about 2 weeks. So
Right. And,
uh,
and then his infrastructure week is coming after that.
Infrastructure Week, and don't forget about the healthcare plan. All of that, so we have a lot of exciting stuff to look forward to. Glenn, let's finish off with this. We look at somebody like Rudy Giuliani, who now, to your earlier point, owes $148 million to Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman. How does someone get out of that hole? Like, he'll never be able to make that kind of money. So what happens to someone like that for the rest of his life?
I think you are paying out for the rest of your life. I mean, when you owe people money, some of the debts can be discharged in bankruptcy. In other words, he'll pay out pennies on the dollar. Whatever he has will be apportioned out by the court among his many creditors, the people he owes money. And then after a period of time, those debts can be discharged, even though the creditors are never made whole. But my understanding is you can't discharge a civil judgment like in a defamation case in bankruptcy. So what does that mean? It means that Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss will forever be chasing down any assets that might come Rudy Giuliani's way. You can file for liens and writs of attachment. You can garnish wages to the extent he has any wages coming in the future. And I have a feeling their lawyers, Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman's lawyers, will be dogged and will stay on top of Rudy Giuliani and make sure they can lawfully wring every penny out of him that the law allows to, have him at least move in the direction of satisfying that money judgment.
Well, that seems like a hopeful place to leave off. Obviously, we'll stay on top of any further litigation, especially between Donald Trump and his own former attorney and still current mouthpiece and henchman, Rudy Giuliani. So with that said, if you want to follow along, for those watching, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.